Blocks can be used for several purposes. As we saw, creating a simple block is not that complicated at all. Editing them is also easy. Let's open up the annotation file for this chapter. Let's start by inserting a block. First, let's go to Model Space. That's where the line work belongs. Type the word insert, or you know what? If it's on the ribbon, where do you think it would be at? Well, we're in the Home tab. Here's a block panel. Here's Insert. You can also create a block, open up the block editor, and edit different attributes in an attributed block, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. Those are really cool. Those put in fields inside a block that you can edit. And each block has a field, and so you can put a different value in that field for every instance of the block. You can do a lot with those things. And here are some other things that you can use to edit them. We'll look at those later on. Click Insert. Now select the chair block. We already have one in this drawing, so we're going to use that. Click OK. Now let's place it in this room here. There you go. It's that simple. Blocks are used to create and change objects very quickly, especially line work that it's repeated, just like the line work for this chair. If you need a second type of chair, then you have to make a second chair block. The nice thing about having one chair style is that if I edit the chair block, and once I do edit that block, then every place where we inserted it, for example, it's already been inserted throughout this room, then all of those chairs will also be updated instantly. We don't have to go back to each chair and update it. That's why we use CAD. To do that on the drafting board, you'd have to erase all of the chairs and redraw each one individually, and that takes time. So to edit a block, you can do this a couple of different ways. Select it, and go up here in the ribbon and click on the block editor, or you can type in the word bedit for bedit, press enter, and this will bring up a list of all of the blocks that are in your file. Find the one you want, select it, click OK. Now another method is to select the block, right-click, and pick the block editor. Or you can double-click the block, and it will bring up the block editor list, find the block you want, and it should highlight the block you've just double-clicked on, and click OK. That's the method I like to use because it's the quickest, and it requires the fewest amount of steps. So now you're in the block editor mode. And the block editor is a contextual ribbon tab that has all of your block editing tools. All of your other tools that you have, like drawing lines, circles, etc., are also available to you here in the block editor. Once you're done editing your block, you can pick on the Close Block Editor button. If you made changes to it, it'll ask you if you do want to save those changes or discard them. Say, no, you know what, I don't want to make any of these changes. I give up, I quit. I didn't really mean this. That's okay. Don't feel bad. But there are two main ways to edit a block. You can edit them through the block editor, as we just saw, or you can edit them in place. Either one will do the same thing, and it just depends on what you need. The block editor gives you lots of fancy buttons, as you saw, and puts all of your block editing options right there in front of you. But editing a block in place allows you to edit the block as it exists in your drawing. This gives you a different view or a different perspective, and if your block needs to relate or correspond to your other line work, but still remain a block all on its own, that's a good method to use. To get to that, select your block, right-click, and pick the Edit Block in Place. This starts what's called the Ref Edit, or the Reference Edit command. Pick the chair, pick OK, and everything else is going to fade back. Now, I can't really pick these things and do anything to them, but I can draw lines, and I can snap to them. Now, what I'm drawing now is going to be a part of the block, but this gives you the opportunity to, let's say I want to create a desk with the chair block, but I want to make sure that the chair fits against the wall properly. Start the line command, and I want to put it on this wall. And I can. Turn on my ortho command, and close it. So now I have my chair, I have my desk, and I know that it fits properly against the wall here. All I have to do is come up here and hit Save Changes, and it says all of your changes are going to be saved. Click OK or Cancel if I want to keep going. And there you go. That's one block. Now, we edited the chair block. We added this table portion to it. What do you think is going to happen to the rest of the drawing? There you go. All of these other chairs now have tables as well. And that's okay. I can do something kind of cool here. If I select, right-click, and edit the block in place, see, it's only the one block all by itself now. So it kind of hides these things. This is kind of tricky, and it makes it kind of confusing because we really wanted those chairs to be there. But I can kind of see what's going on here. And I can use the stretch command to make my table a bit smaller. Then come up here to the Ref Edit panel on the ribbon. Click Save Changes. OK. And now all my tables are fixed. So now we've set up a room with tables and chairs, and we can make changes to it globally very quickly. That's the beauty of blocks. Now if we look at the block editor again, just double click on one of the blocks, pick chair, OK. This will open it up in the block editor. I can't see anything else but the line work for the block. It isolates it, but that's okay. Now, you have a lot of different options up here that we're not going to get to talk about, like the parametric constraints and the dimensional constraints and things like that. We will look at attributes and attribute definitions a little bit later on, and we will briefly look at some dynamic blocks. We'll give you an introduction to them, but they're very complicated and a little bit beyond the scope of what we're doing here in this video. However, they are very useful. The block editor opens and it puts you in this block editing state. And this is how the block's going to look when you insert it into the drawing. Now we can make changes to all the line work here that we want, just the same way you would in a regular drawing mode. Now it allows you to edit this block without any other objects getting in the way, which is nice. We'll change the chair again. Let's get rid of our table, delete it. Let's put all of the line work here, not on the chair layer, but on layer 0, and make sure it's set to by layer. And there we go. Now we can also make some other changes to it here. We can give it rectangular arms instead of elliptical. Use the mirror command. Let's erase that one. And now we have a little bit different chair. One thing that's really cool about the block editor is that you can test your block. If I click Test Block, it'll show me what it's going to look like in the drawing mode. If we made a dynamic block or an attributed block, this is very important because I can keep editing my block, but I can see how it's going to work. With static line work like this, it's really not a big deal. You know exactly what's going to happen. So when you're done testing your block, pick the Close Test Block window. AutoCAD will reset itself inside the block editor, and when you're all done, everything's great, you can close the block editor. Save the changes, and now our chair is saved. It's on the proper layer, it's on chair. You can test it out by changing one of the layers real quick. Just getting a preview, say yes, it's working the way I want it to. Fantastic. So now you know how to edit a block. And you've found a couple of different ways on how to make those changes. Typically, you're going to want to use the block editor. But if you need to make changes to a block in reference to the surrounding line work, edit the block in place. Also, though, sometimes with the editing block in place, like with attributes, we'll look at those later on, it may be a little bit difficult to do that. So for static line drawings, just like this chair, with no moving parts or anything, editing it in place is fine, and editing it in the block editor is also just as fine.